Hello friends, myself Vikas Shakya, and today in this series of Entity Framework tutorial, I'm going to discuss about the code first approach in this Entity Framework model. We have discussed till now about two approaches. First one was a schema first approach, where a database schema was there, a table was there, and you created your own entity in your application, and then you used that entity model to fetch the data from database. And in second video we discussed about the entity first approach, where you created the entity in your application and then you connected to the database. Okay, and then you just created a new table in the database, and then you did the same thing to fetch the data as you done in the first case, that is the schema first. But today we are going to discuss about the code first approach. In the code first approach, we are going to create the classes to define the entities. Okay, and then using those classes, we are going to create the new database tables. Okay, so just create a new application, and here I'm going to write it code first entity example. This is the name, and I'm going to create it now. Make it empty project, and then it will be open for you. My system takes some time, so if you want you can just move the video ahead, but I think now it's available. Yeah, so it came here. This is the code first entity example which I'm going to show you. So here I'm just going to create one entity using the class. So I'm just going to define a class, but before that I'm just going to add a new item, which is the Ario.NET entity data model, and here I'm going to create one employee DB entity, not just employee entity. So just add it, and when you will add it, it will ask you to select one of the options. What should the model contain? So we have used this designer from database, which is the schema first approach, and then we use this one empty ffef, a designer model, which was the entity first approach. And now we are going to use this one, the code first from database. Okay, and this one is empty code first model. So we are going to create empty code first model. Okay, so all the references have been added. Don't worry about this new class added. You don't need to worry about this class anymore. I have added this class. This class was added by default when I added this reference to the Ario.NET entity framework. So we will start here from creating our new class, which will represent the entity. So I'm just going to create a new item, and the name should be, the class should be employee data. Okay, so I'm just adding it. This is the employee data class. So I just want to create my table name with this employee data only, right? So what I need to do, using system dot component model dot data annotations. Okay, and then using system dot component model dot design. Okay, so here I'm going to give one thing, which is the table, and here I'm going to give the name as employee details. Okay, so if I give this name table employee details, then against this particular entity, a table name will be created in the database with this name employee details. But here you can see it's showing some mistake. It is showing that there is some error, and to fix it, it will show you the potential fix. If you click on it, and it will show you that where you have to add it. Okay, so this is the one, schema. So once you added the schema, just remove this one. This design one is not needed here. It needs the schema. So when you use the schema, then it will give you this table attribute. Okay, so this table is the annotation. This annotation has been defined inside this namespace, this class schema. Okay, so when you create any table, you need to define a key, the primary key. Okay, when you did a key, and then you give a name, public int emp id, and it's an attribute, get and set. We have set the get and set, so it's an attribute, which is the key attribute, primary key. And rest I'm going to write like public string emp name, and again I'm going to give the get and set. Right, so if you create a table, then these will be the columns, emp id and emp name. If you want that against this attribute, your column name should be something else, then you can write like column, and then you can write like attributes here. The column name will be employee name. So this will be the column name for you against this emp name, right? So again I'm going to give one more property, at least public string emp address, then get and set. That's it. So I'm going to create a simple entity using this class, whose key would be emp id. This will be the primary key for this table, emp id, and then emp name will be the other column, and the emp address will be the next column. Right, so let's see how we can do that. Okay, so this one is my employee data class, but how we will communicate this class to the database? So for that, you need to add a new class here and give the name employee db context. In fact, we have already got one employee data, employee entity dot cs, code first employee example, which has been inherited from this db context. When we added the reference to the ADO.NET, the ADO.NET entity framework, then in that case, you might have seen that I told you this class will be created, right? So now we are going to use this class. Just remove all the unnecessary code. Just remove this code, right? Just remove everything else that you have here. And this one is db context class, right? So here we are going to write one more property, public list using system dot generic collections dot generic. Okay, so this one is systems dot generic, and now write like public list or you can say like db set, and it will return employee data. We have created the employee data class, right? So it will be employee data, and then we are going to create the name here, employee data s, and it will be like get and set. It will be a property, get and set, for this one. right? So we have created two classes as of now. One is this employee data class, which will contain the actual representation of the entity, right? How our entity will look like. And then we have employee entity.cs, which is the DB interface, which is basically the database interface, which will act like a database interface for you. And here you have defined this DB set, which will return employee data set, right? So this one will be the interface to the database, right? So how we will define, how we know that this will be the interface to the database? For that, you need to do a change in web.config. So in web.config, you can see that there is a connection string with this name, employee entity, right? And always remember that with whatever name your class has been created, which will be inheriting from the DB context, which will be doing the database interfacing. What is this? Yeah, this one was the problem. Okay, so employee entity, this one is the class which has been inherited from this DB context. And whatever class you are going to inherit from the DB context and which will be going to the database to fetch the data, that class name should be here as a connection string. Remember this rule. This class, this is the class name, and this is also a connection string representation. Based on this, this will only map. If you give the name employee entity 1 or 2, anything, then in that case, it's not going to work. Okay. So I'm just going to correct it now. We are just going to do some changes now. So just remove everything else. Apart from the provider name, just remove the connection string part. And in this connection string, we need to give server name. Server is equal to dot, which means the current database server. And then database is equal to, we are going to give a new name, sample, SAMPLE, sample DB. This name we are going to give. And for security, I mean for the connection to the database, we are using the inherited security model, which is like with whatever credentials you have logged into the system, the same credentials and the same authorization will be used to reach to the database. Same authentication authorization will be used to reach to the database. And since you are the owner of this computer, you can open the database server. This is the database server. I'm able to open it. So I'm the administrator, and with the same name, if I want to connect to the database, I just need to give one more attribute here, integrated security is equal to true. That's it. And then provider name is system.data.sql client. Okay, that's it. So just compile it, but we are not done yet. I just want to compile it to see that everything is fine till now. But after that, one more thing is needed. And what is that needed? We have this employee data class, we have this employee entity class, which is the DB interface. But we need an object here, which will be getting and fetching the data from the database. This will be fetching the data from database, but that representation of data should be with an object. And that object, for that object, we need to add a class. So we are just going to add a new class, and we are going to give the name employee DB representation, representation. EMP-DB representation. This will be the name of the class. And here I'm going to write a function public list employee data get employee details, right? And here what I will do, I'm just going to do like return. Here I'm going to create employee entity. I'm just going to create an object of the employee entity class. ET is equal to new employee entity. And this class is the DB interface class, which will be interfacing with the database. So I have created that one, and ET dot employee datas dot to list. So this will convert all the data which will be fetched by this employee data interface, employee entity interface, to a list, and this is the one which we are going to return. Return et.employeedata.toList. And that's it. We are done now. Now we just need to add a new form and try to display the data. Right? So we have three classes. You just remember that you need to write three classes. One is the entity. One class you will write for the entity. The other class you are going to write for the database interfacing. And the last one we have written a new class which will be representing the data which was fetched by the data from the database by this interface, employee entity interface. Okay, so we are done now, and now we are just going to add a new item which should be the waveform, and I'm not going to change the name here. I'm just going to add it, and here we are going to add as usual the grid view. And now we are not going to add this entity data source. We are going to use this object data source, right? So we have an object data source and then we have a grid view. Just compile it again and now move to the design view. And in the design view, you just need to configure this entity data source. Okay, so choose your business object. What we will choose? We will choose the data representation, EMP-DB representation. We will choose this one, the representation object we will choose. Okay, and then just do a next and then choose a method. We have written a method there. The name was get employee details, which is returning the employee data list. And then just do a finish. That's it. You have configured. And now just make it some colorful and then just add the data source here, and the data source is object data source. Okay, so the data source is available here and you have connected to the object. So now just try to run it and let's see what happens. So it is running as of now. So it will first create the database, and in the database there will be a table, and also since the table is there but there is no data in the table, so you will not see any results here. But there must be the new database created there, sample database. I just refreshed it. So a new database which is the sample database that should have been created, and inside that table, inside that database, there must be a table with name employee details. So this is my table, and I'm going to create a query to fetch the result from this employee details table. So I need to use the database sample db. Just write this command and then select asterisk from employee details, right? So just run it and you will be able to see that there is no record. But now let's insert some record. Insert into employee details values, and here I'm going to give a name, some ID first, then I'm going to give some name Vikash, and then I'm going to give the address which is Noida, and let's see if I can introduce a record. Okay, so you don't need to provide this 100 because the first column is a primary key. First column is a primary key and that is on auto incremented as well, right? So that's an identity column. So it will add it. One row affected, and now you're going to select the record. I think two records must be there because I added them twice. Okay, so no worries. I'm just going to add one more record with name Sumit. And then there should be Amit, and he should be from Baku. Okay, so these are the places, and if you see the record, there should be 4 records. So now we expect that when we will run this again, this application, and then in that case, we should be able to see the 4 records, the records which we have added. Okay, so here you can see the employee ID, employee name, employee address, all these things are visible here. So this is the way you can use the code first approach to use the entity framework. I hope you got the point, and in next video we are going to do some troubleshooting around these things. Like sometimes it may happen that when you are going to create a table, then in that case you might get some issue. Like suppose if I'm going to change the name of any of the columns in my entity, this is my entity. If I'm going to add a new column here, then in that case what will happen? If I'm going to change it, then how it will handle? So how we are going to handle that thing will be discussed in next video. We will see that how we can do that and how we can avoid that. Okay, so what should be the correct fix for that? We will all discuss that. So I hope you got the point in this video, that how you can create a code first entity example. And let me know if you want to know something else, and please like, subscribe my channel, and please share the video with your friends as well. You will find so many things here. You can explore my channel, and you can see that there are a lot many videos in different languages. We have a team of members who will be creating the new videos in different languages. Okay, so in programming languages, and some of the videos are in Hindi and these videos are in English. Okay, so you can go to the algorithm section as well. There is a playlist of algorithms as well. You can go and understand that how we have discussed the algorithms there. Those are all important algorithms. So you can subscribe the channel, you can share the videos, and you can give me the important suggestions, feedbacks. Okay, so we will meet soon. So till then, have a nice day, and bye bye.